Well, welcome to the fantastic Worsbrough Reservoir. And, oh, hang on a sec, we've got one on. I'm proud to say that after just over a year of work being done on the wall at Worsbrough, it's been closed for quite a while. We're back on it now, we're match fishing. Just had the second match since the reopening on Sunday. And let me tell you, it's fishing absolutely brilliant. Now, what Barnsley and District Angling Association did was they put some fresh fish in during the closure of the res. And I can't tell you how well it's fishing. The venue record was broke only a couple of weeks ago on the first match back with 215 pounds. But more to the point, everyone's catching loads of fish. So you've joined me here today just to run through how I approach this kind of venue, and especially Worsbrough is now getting renowned as a prolific carp water. The carp in here are absolutely stunning. So if you want to come for a great day's fishing, this is the place to come. So during this video, I want to run through a simplistic approach, targeting carp and bream using a method feeder approach at range. Now, it's not just about fishing 100 meters, it's all those little intricacies that make fishing at range easier. And once you get the setup right, it's not about who can cast the furthest, it's about doing it neatly, doing it efficiently. So today, for example, you join me on the Barnsley bank in the shallows, and I'm fishing at range, but 75 meters, a nice comfortable cast where I can fish to the clip, I can feed it accurately, I can build up a bed of bait, and that's exactly what's happening. So for the first 2 hours, not a lot's happened, and since then I've had a carp every single cast. Now there's a few little things I'm doing different today, so I'm going to run through in a little bit more detail about that, about the intricacies about hook baits and how to load the feeder up. And if you get it right, you can put this to use on all your local waters that are very similar to this kind of venue, you know, like your Boddingtons and your Barnsley reservoirs, you know, good venues full of carp. But let me tell you, I'm absolutely loving it. And when you're catching fish like this, it can turn a cold winter's day into a day to remember. And this is exactly why we've come here today. Let me just, hopefully if he's going to behave, just take the hook out. Put the rod down. This is the average stamp of the fish now. New fish these are as well. This is a new carp. Look at that. Now that is what it's all about. Look at the condition of that, absolutely prime condition, and you can tell the happy fish because the amount of natural food in here is simply incredible. So let's talk about my setup. Now for a start, in order to fish at range, you want a rod and a setup that can make the job easy. That is the most important thing. A lot of people go down the route of trying to get away with the shortest rod possible because they feel that they get more of a feeling of catching fish using a shorter rod. But when you're trying to hit ranges from 70 meters and above, you've got to have a rod that makes things easy, makes things efficient. You're not going to have crack-offs, because if you think about it, if you're using a longer rod through the progression of the cast and casting on a regular basis, I might be casting from catching a load of fish 30, 40 times in a match, which is a lot of times in a long range match. I'm putting less stress in my tackle if I've got a rod that allows me to get to that distance easy. I'm not having to stress and compress that blank as much because the rod's doing all the work. So for that reason, I'm using a 13-foot Shimano Aero Pro. Very, very good. It's without doubt the best distance rod I've ever used in my life, simply because it's so light. That means as you're pushing that feeder through the air, you've got more generated power through the blank. And it's also coupled with Ultegra XTC 5500, best casting reel on the market in my opinion because of the weight again. So the setup itself is incredibly light, so that means fishing at range easier, makes it a lot easier. Now the main line I'm using is aero float line. It's actually a line that we've designed for float fishing. Now the beauty about a light line, a supple line, is especially at range, you've got minimal resistance as the line is coming off the spool. So that aids your distance. So that means you don't have to put as much power into the cast because the line just peels off that spool so smooth. So choosing the right properties within a main line is really important for match distance fishing. Coupled with a 10-pound shot leader. Length of the shot leader again is really important. So I've got the shot leader knot, which is a loop on the main line and a half blood knot of the shot leader to the loop of the main line on the reel, and the length of the shot leader is up the rod, back down the rod, and then another meter past the bottom of the rod. So if I just keep going, there, the knot is just there. So I've got an extra meter of line below the rod. That means that when I'm playing fish and they're coming close in, I've got the fish on the shot leader. I'm putting the full power of the rod when I've got them under my feet on the shot leader. That gives you ultimate confidence that nothing's going to let you down. Moving down to the terminal end, I've got a medium Guru hybrid feeder with bunches of maggots. I mean, look at that. Bunches of maggots. What fish cannot resist a bunch of maggots? Now, as you all know, I'm sure those of you that follow me, I always swear by washters, and I do. But since travelling abroad a lot recently, maggots, bunches of maggots in a band was so effective abroad. I wanted to put that into use in my fishing back home. That's exactly why I've come here today, just to give it a go. And let me tell you, it's unbelievable, almost as if it's a bait that the fish aren't used to seeing. Of course, we've got some washters there, another feeder with a washter, and I've had quite a few fish on that. But I think in fishing, if you can do something that's a little bit different than the rest of the field, it might get you them extra few fish. And of course, it's new to the fish as well. So everyone down the bank is chucking out a washter nowadays. So it is good to mix up your hook baits, and that is exactly why I've set myself up with this. So 6-pound hook length, a size 12 MWG, and a bunches of maggots on the band. Now I'm going to show you how to put maggots on the band, but the beauty about it, you can use this information for carp fishing at range, on your local commercials, fishing bunches of maggots on a band, down the margins, barbel fishing. It's got so much scope to it, this actual setup. And like I said, it's new to the fish. I think the fish are not wised up to it and they take it more confidently. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to load the feeder up now and just check everything's intact. A big thing to remember when you're long range fishing, every single cast counts. So you have to make sure that before you cast out, you're completely happy with the setup that you've got. So I'm just checking everything's intact, which it is. Hook bait's all right. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to load up the feeder, create a flat table. Like if you watch any of my videos, this is the principle of what I do when I'm loading up a method feeder, a hybrid feeder. And of course, a hybrid feeder for long range fishing is really important because you've got retention of bait within that feeder. You've got the walls protecting that bait, creating that focal point on the bottom. Of course, you can use a flatbed, but I honestly believe you've got no protection of your bait, and you could quite easily, if you're sitting out there for 15-20 minutes at a time, I, as an angler, want to know that everything's intact and I'm fishing efficiently, and that is the beauty about a hybrid feeder. You know everything's intact on the bottom. That means now I can then put a cap on top, which will retain on the feeder for a longer period of time and get the parcel of bait, let's call it, to the bottom where I want it to be intact on the deck. There we go. That's all ready for casting. So let's give it another go and see what happens. There we go. Here we go. I think that's on. Well, it's like clockwork at the moment. I'd say the average bite time is 4 to 6 minutes. Not forgetting I'm pleasure fishing. And of course, when the lake's under more pressure, You know, you'd think we won't make a difference. We're talking about, it's 400 metres wide, but yet when there's a match on, loads of feeders going out, loads of noise on the surface, fish back away. The fish feed differently. They feed under pressure, therefore your bite times are a little bit longer. It's almost as if they're a little bit more cautious to take that bait and they're not competing as much. But here I am, on my own, pleasure fishing, and getting a carp every single drop. And like I said, the average bite time today is about 4 minutes. Now, of course, you've got to compensate for the stretch in the line. I'm fishing to a clip, and this is the beauty about using quite a supple main line, because the bites are very slow and progressive, and that is actually a carp that's picked up your bait, hooked itself, and now it's running out of your peg, and yet the bite actually looks like a line bite. It's that slow and progressive. That gives you time to get line back on your reel when you pick your rod up on the initial run of the bite, so you don't actually have to take your clip off. It's very rare you should have to take your clip off when you're fishing at range because of that factor, because of the stretch in the line. I've had to do it once today because I had a big double and it literally took 30 yards of line off my clip. And for that reason, it's really important, and this is why I love using a pale line, to actually mark the line so I know if I have to take that clip off, as I'm reeling that same fish back, I'm looking for the mark on my line, which I use a black marker pen for, and I can actually put the clip on whilst I'm playing that fish, reel the fish back, and I can cast back out, and I'm back in the same spot fishing again without having to stick up my rods, you know, kind of like clip up after I've landed the fish. I don't want to be doing that in match conditions. I want to be back out in the water in the same spot. And the beauty about Worsbrough is fish come to bait here, so if you just keep at a sensible distance and occasionally keep casting some bait out, it's not about setting a trap and putting a load of bait to get them coming. It's kind of like a progressional feeding pattern. You can end up with a fantastic day's fishing on a handful of bait. It's not about ploughing loads of bait out. And this is a typical, this is an old Worsbrough carp, original fish. You can just tell by the colour of them. But let me tell you, every fish that you're catching here is absolutely pristine. I mean, look at that. And some of the fish we've had today, the scale markings on them are just absolutely stunning. He's even got his top fin up for us. I mean, look at that. Hey, hiya, mate. Thank you. Slide him back in and hopefully catch another one. Now, long range method feeder fishing, like I say, is where you've got to have confidence in yourself. You've got to be patient. Once you've got that confidence, knowing that you're using the right bait, you're loading your feeder up correctly, you're fishing at a range that you can fish efficiently, let's say, it gives you confidence to sit there and wait. What it definitely isn't a case of is casting out, making noise, because what happens in the long run is you're putting too much of a volume of bait at once, and either the fish back away from the noise or it takes them too long to find your hook bait. So this is why it's really good when you're long range fishing for this style of fishing, because although I might be here for, let's say in a match, 5 hours, I might only have a window of an hour where I might get the fish on my bait. So I need to manage my casts. You know, so 10 to 12 minutes, I'd say, here works really well. But on a hard day, it could be 20 minutes, 25 minutes a cast. And it's all dictated by how the fish are feeding on the day, of course, because I'm pleasuring. There's more bait coming into there's more fish coming into my peg. I'm getting bites quicker. So I'm now just going to load my hook bait up. Now, although banded maggot is such a good bait, and I mean amazing bait, I've had, I think, 6 fish on that single setup without having to change my hook bait or anything. It's a bit fiddly. So you see I'm using a bait bander here, and I'm just sliding a maggot in at a time, closing down on them. Another maggot, closing down. So I'm clamping onto the maggots that I'm putting into this band, and my aim is to get about 7 or 8 maggots in here. The end result is a lovely, attractive band of maggots. I'm using white and reds, my go-to colours. You can use all kinds of colours. It's the beauty about maggots. So once I've got it like that, got a nice big ball of maggots in there. Some of them might fall out, not bothered. That's why I put more in than that I need. And then just slide the pin off. So there we have the end result. A lovely, attractive ball of maggots. Now the beauty about maggots is as well, they're so light and buoyant. So you can imagine, once they're in the bottom, they're moving around on the bottom. They're kind of like really catching the fish eye. And it's such a large bait, but it targets everything. You know, if there's bream in my peg, tench, whatever is in my peg feeding, that is going to get picked up. And of course, because they're in a band, you are deterring your setup from nuisance fish, let's say, your small roach and your skimmers. Now, I've picked a marker on the other bank. The thing is, when you're distance fishing, is you want to hit your clip efficiently, so the line's nice and tight and the feeder is landing intact on the surface. That's giving you more of a focal point, knowing in your head as well that when you're on the bottom fishing, everything's intact. So I'm looking at my marker and I want to make sure I'm hitting my clip in the air. Be positive with your cast. I've hit the clip. There we go, and it's landed nice and neat on the surface, and you can see how tight the line is as well, which is really important. Now, a lot of people then sink the line. Of course, I'm using a 55 gram hybrid feeder to get to that range. Because of the tension against the weight of that feeder, the line is tight naturally. I don't bother sinking the line. Even if it's really windy, I let the line naturally sink itself. And within a minute, that line is going to creep back to my quiver tip. Also, the advantage of that, and this is something I always advocate when I go commercial fishing, if I all of a sudden now I get a line or an indication, the chances are that's an indication from nearer the feeder, simply because the majority of the line is still on the surface. So when you're locating fish, it helps you locate fish quicker by having the line on the surface, looking at your tip, looking for those indications, and knowing that if you're not catching and you're not getting indications, there could be a case that you might have to take the clip off and work a bit further out. And especially that is the case on commercials, simply by using the line on the surface as a guideline. So now the line is gradually sinking. I'm just going to mend the line, let's say, as if we're stick float fishing, just to keep the line straight while it's naturally sinking. And always have a slight tension on your tip when you're long range fishing. Obviously, especially on these kind of wild waters, it's natural that you're going to have to combat undertow and wind movement, which naturally creates that tension itself anyway. But a lot of your bites when you're long range fishing are drop back bites, where the fish pick the bait up, they feel the weight of the feeder, the hook is set, and often they swim towards you. And this is why it's really important to have tension on your quiver tip to read either the tip going around or the tip dropping back. And it's amazing, although I'm using an 019 mainline to a 10-pound shock leader, when those two knots are connected, if I was to, and I've snagged up once today on some, I'm fishing up to some like sticks coming out of the water, it's a little bit snaggy. I've actually snagged up, and I'm using 021 hook length to a 12 MWG, my hook length breaks. So you've got a very thin main line, a 10-pound shock hook. Because of the stretch at that distance, your hook length goes first. It's amazing how strong that setup is. So never be afraid with a shock leader setup, let's say, a thin main line and a thick shocker, to play your fish with confidence, because your knot will never go as long as you tie it correctly. And a key to tying knots correctly is do them at home. Set your rods up at home so you've got time to pay attention to detail to how you tie the knot. But as you form that knot, wet the knot in washing up liquid, and it's amazing how smooth the knots join together with minimal damage, because we're talking about plastic here. If you just wet the knot, which is good, You do get friction in the knot as you're pulling it down, but with washing up liquid, you've got zero friction whatsoever. That gives you, all in all, a better, stronger setup. So that is a top tip when you're tying your shot leaders at home. Always use washing up liquid on the knot before you tighten it up. And let me tell you, you know, like what I said, simple approach and you can catch a lot of fish. I think there's some key elements with distance fishing that me personally, I'm a massive believer, and I've been educated, let's say, by your very good carp anglers. This is a crossover style of technique of fishing that we're actually using a lot of intricacies within this setup that the carp anglers use, and additives is one of them. So I always use complex T for this style of fishing. Big open water reservoirs. Carp absolutely adore complex T. Now this is a food hydration liquid. I add it into my pellets, and it's a real trigger point for the fish, almost as if the best way of relating it to, let's say, walking past a fish and chip shop when you're not really hungry and you get that whiff of fish and chips and all of a sudden your appetite lifts up. That is exactly what certain additives do to bait for carp, especially carp. For me personally, complex T is the bait, is the additive that I love to use with this wild waters, because I believe it really does help draw fish over your zone. When you've got a massive expanse of water in front of you, you need something that's got that pulling power. And a lot of top carp anglers use the additives within complex T and complex T itself for that reason. It gives them that confidence knowing they're going to draw fishing quicker into their zone. And again, keep it simple with your hook bait. So I've got washters and I've got bunches of maggots. That's all I'm going to alternate. I'm not pink, yellow, red, orange, green. Once I'm confident with my setup, I know that I'm sat there with the right setup, that if I haven't had a bite, it's just that there's nothing there at that moment and I need to recast it or wait until they start feeding. I'm not thinking, have I got the right colour on? You know, and once you start going down that route, it makes you impatient. It makes you, it gives you less confidence on each cast, and that can really affect your fishing if you're constantly casting out making noise. Like what I said, you end up having to venture further out because you're spooking the fish. So be confident with your setup. So here we are. Oh. Isn't it great when that happens? You look round and rod's locked up. I can't tell you how good this day is. This is absolutely amazing. Literally a carp every single chuck in with both washters and maggots on the hook. And I can't wait just to get back at Worsbrough this Sunday again in the match. I mean, I was lucky on Sunday because I won the match with £87. Had a lovely day's fishing, but halfway through the match I'd got nothing, and then I've ended up with 13 carp, and that just goes to show how important it is to manage your casts, be patient, be confident, and even if it's the last hour, it's amazing what you can catch in that last hour. I had 3 carp in the last 12 minutes on Sunday, so at the right time of the day, all of a sudden there's more fish in your peg, they're competing more, and they take your hook bait quicker. And you can often get a bite within seconds of that feeder hitting the bottom once they're feeding, once you've got them in that mode. Now again, when you're playing carp, especially at range, I always like to keep my rod really low, even when I'm down to my shot leader, because it brings the fish in nearer, like so. So although I'm only using a 13-foot rod, I'm using a long rod, that means I'm bringing the fish in quicker, more efficiently as well. Another beautiful Worsbrough carp. Look at that. Let me just see if I can hold him up to the thing. But look at that, right in the corner of the lip there, on a bunch of maggots. They just cannot resist that bait. Literally cannot resist it. And I think I'm Couldn't have asked for a better fish, really, to sign off. Fantastic day's fishing. I mean, look at that for a beautiful fish. I've absolutely loved today, and I hope there's a few hints and tips there you can put to use, regardless of the season, time of year, and regardless of the terrain, the venue. Hopefully you can put to use and catch loads of fish. So, until next time, tight lines.